Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, across the country. It's time for Cleveland, Ohio to come front and center. Peter Ray opens this up, hosts this great show, the American Sports History Podcast. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing it, 347-205-9631. Show goes by quick. Send your questions in. Or catch the archive version on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports podcast platforms powered by Mancini Media. So without further ado, let me lay the red carpet down, put the podium in its place, hand off the mic. First of all, Peter, how are you? Second of all, how can people get a hold of you? Third of all, you emptied the tank and you brought another great guest in tonight.
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well. I have a YouTube channel. It's my name, Peter J. Ray. I have a website. It's Adventures in History with Peter J. Ray at peterjray.com. You're absolutely right about tonight's guest. He's from Birmingham, Alabama, and lives in Shell Island, Florida. He had a 3-year pitching playing career in the minor leagues, more than 20 years a pitching coach in the minors, and 6 years as an MLB coach with the Cincinnati Reds, including 2 years as their pitching coach. It's an honor and a privilege to have on the show tonight Coach Mack Jenkins.
Well, hey, man, thanks for having me. I look forward to having a great show tonight.
Right, absolutely. First of all, Coach Jenkins, can you give us, an overview of your life in baseball?
Sure, man. I signed the contract with Cincinnati Reds in June of 1986, and I pitched for 3+ years in the minor leagues and had some arm issues, and 1989 ended up being my last season. My arm just didn't work anymore, and at that time the Reds actually offered me a scouting position, which I turned down because I had one class to graduate. I needed a freshman level physics class. So I took that. It was my only A of my college career. And shortly after I finished, they offered me a job as pitching coach in Rookie League Billings, Montana. So in 1990, I embarked on that. And I traveled across the country coaching. I have coached in Canada and the Dominican Republic and Venezuela. So I coached, like I said, from 90 to 2006 as pitching coach. In 2007 to 2011, I was minor league pitching coordinator for Cincinnati, in charge of all the pitching staffs and the throwing programs and training programs for all the pitchers that we had. And then in 2012, I joined the major league staff and was on that staff from 2012 until 2018, serving as bullpen coach, assistant pitching coach, and pitching coach. 2019, I spent the year working with the Washington Nationals in Hagerstown, Maryland, and was there long enough to earn a World Series ring, my second one. So pretty pumped to have 2 of those. They're hard to come by.
You have 2 World Series rings, one with Hagerstown, and what's the other one?
I have one with Cincinnati, 1990, and the Washington Nationals, 2019.
Oh, 1990, right? Their last title.
That's
I remember when they won. I was like, "Geez, these guys, they were dominant in the '70s. Now and then they rebuild and they win again. But here it's now. That's the last one for the Reds."
Well, see, there's a common thread, Peter. The common thread is that was my first year with Cincinnati, 1990. They won the World Series. My first year with Washington, they won a World Series. So I'm not sure what these teams are waiting for. You know?
Right. Yeah, it seems pretty clear. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was watching the 1975 All-Star game, and Jim Cott was in. And he did this interesting thing where it was a quick pitch where he'd get the ball, and his windup was rather minimal. And he'd really, the guys would get in the box. And Joe Morgan stepped out a couple times on pitches that the cut ended up throwing that were declared no pitches. Are guys? Do you know any guys, or have you known any guys who have done that over the years? The so-called quick delivery to kind of upset the hitters.
Well, Peter, I think it's been so common the last few years that pitchers do that, and the pitcher who started it to me, Cott did it, but it was a long time. But Johnny Cueto started that in Cincinnati, around 2012. And it just kind of grew, and I think you saw the success that Cueto had, and then you had more and more hitters going to this high leg kick. And the pitchers who quick pitched or they gave a hesitation, they really interrupted those the hitters with like Justin Turner or Donaldson, those guys with the high leg kick. The pitchers who gave them a no leg kick, they really messed with their timing. And that was the name of the game with pitching, interrupting that timing of the hitter. So I think that's a weapon now that I even see it now in the colleges. Pitchers have adopted such a thing.
How about the knuckleball? What's your experience with that pitch?
You know what? I had one knuckleball pitcher. His name was Fernandez. He pitched for me in Louisville, and he was a blast to have as a pitcher, and he taught me all about the knuckleball. And he was originally with the Red Sox, and he had learned from Wakefield. And Jared had some major league time as a pitcher with Cincinnati, maybe with Houston also. But I learned a lot about knuckleball that year, and I guess the main thing I learned about it was you cannot catch the ball. I would tell him to throw me the good one, and I would take him in the chest and in the shin, and I would jump out of the way. They're so unpredictable, it's really hard to catch. I can't imagine how hard to hit them it is.
Is the Spitballs still around in baseball?
Well, not that I know of. I know I think people now stay away from their spit, and they just go straight to the perspiration ball with the back of the neck or off the forehead. But I think pitchers are always looking for some type of advantage against hitters.
Has your with the passage of time, of course, we're all learning, and have you changed your, in terms of as a coach, all these years you've been coaching? How have you changed over the years?
Well, I think Peter, one thing that's changed for sure since I started in 1986 is that I think the way that pitchers condition themselves, and I think that's one of the reasons we see so many pitchers now, throwing 95 and over. I mean, we saw more pitches in 2020 over 100 in a shortened season, thrown over 100 miles an hour than we ever had in any 162 game season. And I mean, the key is, it's not just my opinion. I think it's scientific proof that it is the conditioning is so different than it used to be. It's so much more aggressive, and weights are not frowned upon. They're expected of these pitchers, and there's some long toss that used to be thought down upon is now promoted in the minor leagues, in the high schools, in the colleges, and in the major leagues. Guys, long toss, and some of the guys use the weighted ball program. So I think my main the change I've made is, these things are important, and that we can teach velocity. We can improve someone's ability to throw hard. And the other, Peter, you can use the tools now, like a Rapsodo, or you have TrackMan, that shows the spin on a pitcher's fastball. And why that's important is you could take a pitcher with low spin and emphasize that pitcher to work low in the strike zone and probably go with something, like a two-seam fastball the majority of the time to get movement. And a pitch that's thrown at 95 with low spin will end up in a different part of the strike zone with a fastball thrown at 95 with high spin. So, two pitches thrown at the same mile per hour from the same right-handed pitcher, or different right-handed pitchers, say same height, will end up in different spots of the strike zone. So what we found is pitchers with high spin are very good at the top of the strike zone. And we've seen in the major leagues, hitters have a hard time laying off those pitches that are balls, and they pop up a lot and they strike out a lot. And that's an emphasis in today's game, to strike out. And I think the ability to use some of these devices that measure spin rate, helps the pitcher and the pitching coach collaborate on a game plan, and maybe saying, hey, man, maybe your slider, I've been telling you it's not that good, but this spin data, makes him a believer, and now he really wants to go to work to improve that slider or that curveball.
I was a big fan as a young guy in the early 70s, and in my memory, Catfish Hunter is just the greatest pitcher of all time for me, and the coolest guy and everything. And I was watching the other night a game, I think it was an All-Star game, maybe 74, and I thought, geez, this guy doesn't look that good, and in terms of, and but he was I think the best pitcher in baseball early 70s. Now, are there guys today in MLB like Catfish Hunter?
Well, I think there are guys like Catfish, and Catfish was a pitcher who had tremendous command, control, and he was the North Carolina guy, which is where I'm living now, so I know all about Catfish Hunter. And I used to love him when he pitched for the A's and the Yankees. And he used to always have that big wad of North Carolina tobacco in his mouth, too, which is now illegal. Anyway, but I think, there's guys like Kyle Hendricks and Zach Davies that both pitch for the Cubs, that they can't overwhelm a hitter with velocity, but they're still effective pitchers who rely on location, change of speeds. Both those guys have excellent changeups, and they both have movement on their fastball. And Hunter had a great curveball. And, I think even in this era of velocity, you can't get lost on, hitters, when you mess with their timing, you keep them off balance. They just don't hit the ball as hard. And that is the name of the game. It's getting an out, whether you strike them out or you pop them up or you get that grounder. And that's what a guy like Catfish Hunter was great at. That was a guy like Greg Maddux was great at. And there are some guys in the league now who don't overwhelm you with velocity. I mean, Dallas Keuchel makes a lot of money for the White Sox, and he's a pitcher who really relies on, the sinker, the cutter, the changeup. He's not going to bully anyone with velocity, but he's still an effective major league pitcher.
The thing I find interesting about life is dealing with people. We all interact with other people, and everyone's different, and then we have to kind of adjust depending on who we're with. Of course, we are who we are, but the better we can adjust to others, the more effective we'll be in getting along with them. And now as a coach, over the years, you've had all these guys with different temperaments. And the thing is, there has to be, you have to be fair and treat, in a sense, you have to treat everybody the same, but you also have to treat everybody differently because they're different. Do you want to talk about how you've dealt with guys in terms of motivation and trying to, and again, adjusting to different personalities and now, of course, the different cultures that we have from especially a lot of Hispanic fellows and more Asians?
Well, coaches that are great, you learn to communicate with, players from if they're from the United States, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. Professional baseball, Major League Baseball, Minor League Baseball, it's good now that you have interpreters with every club, especially if you have an Asian speaking player. I was lucky enough to grow up in Tampa, and I learned enough Spanish to communicate with all the baseball players because West Tampa is lots of Cuban population. And I enjoyed learning Spanish from those guys while we were playing baseball, and I was able to carry that over to my professional coaching. And you're right, good coaches are able to find out. You might have 12 pitchers on your staff and 12 different personalities, and you have to find that currency for each player. What makes this guy tick? What is his motivation to be a great player. And I think you hold everyone accountable. Like you said, that's the treating everyone the same. You know, if there's we are going to back up the bases, we're going to cover first, we're going to condition ourselves in between our outings or starts, and everyone is going to, you know, bust their butts to get ready. Whether we do the job that night or not, we're going to be physically ready. So that's how, and that, you know, I think you teach the players to police themselves. But you know, in the major leagues, you might get one of your starters is making $20 million, one is making 10, and the other three might be making minimum. You know, so there are like little different bit of rules, but you know, the players handle that themselves. You know, they tell the first year player, hey, I can do that. I've been here 10 years. You haven't been here 10 days. You know, so you toe the line. But, you know, Tom Landry wrote in one of his books, and he was a great coach. He goes, the hardest thing about coaching is finding 10 different ways to say the same thing. So I'm trying to explain to Peter how to throw that curveball so it breaks right, and he doesn't get it. And I'm going to keep teaching him the same thing till I find something. It might be I find out that you love fishing. You know, and I say, hey, man, when you cast that ball, that rod out there, what is your hand action? You show me, and I go, that's just what it's like when you were trying to get you to throw this curveball. And now it syncs up with you, you know. You have an aha moment, the light bulb goes off, and you're like, man, throwing a curve is just like casting my pole out there, throwing my bait out there. You know, I could have someone who is a great golfer. You know, that's their hobby, but I can compare, you know, the tempo that we use to the tempo in your swing, you know. And here you're trying to go too fast when you're hitting those great golf shots. Are you steady tempo? Do you speed up like you do when you're trying to throw hard? And, you know, maybe that just rings a bell where it says, man, you're right, I need consistent tempo. So, you know, getting to know what they do off the field can sometimes help you on the field. You know, can give a comparison to somebody who's a hunter. You know, like there's all kind of things. And that all comes, Peter, with establishing relationships, getting to know each player, letting them know that you sincerely care about them. It can't be, you know, some false bravado out there. I really do care about you, and you know, I want you to succeed. Because if you succeed, I succeed. You know. Right.
I've either read. I talked to Bob Feller once, and he expressed, he's gone now, but he expressed he believed that the whole idea of pitch counts was crazy. That the guys needed to pitch, you know, needed to throw more, and they weren't throwing enough. And of course nowadays, you know, that's a big thing. Everyone keeps track of pitch counts. And what is your thought on the whole philosophy of pitch counts and pros and cons?
Well, I'll talk about pitch counts in professional baseball and the major leagues. I think that if our expectation, I'm talking about as an industry, and we saw it in the World Series, Blake Snell is having a history-making day, and he's taken out because he faced 18 hitters. 18 batters in the major league is about 72, 76 pitches, because each pitcher is going to be between, you know, 3.8 on average, you know, 4+ pitches per batter. And if that's our expectation, that our starters go 75 pitches, not only, and we see it now, that a bullpen almost throws the same amount of innings as the 5 starters, you're just going to need 3 relievers. Now, every club carries 13 pitchers. You know, 10 years ago was 12. 10 years before that was 11. You know, you're going to have to make sure you have 3 guys with options on your team so that you can keep a shuttle from AAA to the major leagues with relief pitchers. So I think that pitch counts are a necessary evil because there's so much, say, this person has a 75 pitch limit. Well, there's many more throws that guy. There's unaccountable pitches. You know, there's pitches in between innings. There's pitches in the bullpen before the game. There's the long toss he did before the game. So I think individual clubs have to start looking at, I mean, if you're looking for an edge, how do I get more innings, quality innings, not just innings? What about, the amount of throws this guy makes, every day, playing catch, then long toss, then he throws in the bullpen and a pregame bullpen, and then you get 8 pitches between every inning. If you threw 80 pitches in a game, you probably ended up making 180 that day. So I think that expectations need to be raised. We see college pitchers who end up being number 1 picks, throwing over 100 pitches on a regular basis. And I'll say that those guys do get, they're the Friday night pitcher. They get 6 days because they only pitch on Fridays. They get 6 days rest in between. Major leagues, we're talking about 4 days. But the truth is, Peter, 2019, we added more off days in the major leagues. It used to be, it was 180 days to play 162 games, and 4 of those days off were in a row. Now there's more days off. So the average day's rest is about 4.5 days, it's 5 days. So I really think we have to, as an industry, you have to expect more from your starting pitchers. And if, the data analysts tell me, they get hit after their 75th pitch, then we need to talk about their conditioning in between starts. Do we need to do more running, less running, more throwing, less throwing? And one thing I can tell you, Peter, is for sure, and I could challenge anyone to say this, all the pitch counts that we have, there are no fewer injuries today than there was 10 years ago when the pitch counts were higher, and 20 years ago when pitchers, threw, 2 years ago there was like 4 times where a pitcher went over 120 pitches. But just 6 years ago there was like 40 times. Before that there was 100 times where pitchers exceeded 120 pitches in a game. So I think you do have quality bullpen, and those guys are making a lot of money out of the bullpen. If I have a lead after 6 innings, I might take that starter out to save him. But, man, I think we have to think about how do we condition. If we say they're running out of gas at 80 pitches, the question should be why, not just accept it and take a guy out of Game 6 of the World Series after he faced 18 hitters. I need that guy to finish the game. He might strike out 18 people that night. It might be a history-making night, but we'll never know because he had to come out after 18 hitters because that was our expectation. I think the expectations have to be raised for the starters to carry, 2/3 of the innings, and those things are dwindling as time passes.
One of the coolest things, I'm into the history of baseball, and the coolest things is Denny McLain was the last 30-game winner. And I don't think anybody's asking who will be the next 30-game winner.
No.
I don't know how many 20-game winners there are each year. Not many.
Do you remember, I think Ron Guidry went 25-3 one year?
I know Steve Carlton won 27, and I was just thinking, boy, nobody's even getting up in the high 20s or mid 20s.
Now if you get 20, good Lord, it's somersaults. So.
And very few complete games today.
Yeah, much less frequency of complete games than it used to be. But like I say, if I have a Aroldis Chapman in the game and it's 2-1. And maybe my starter's tired. Okay, I got that. But still, he pitched 8 innings. He didn't pitch 5. But
do closers ever pitch more than an inning today?
I will say probably 5% of the time. I think
very rarely.
Most of them, I'd say most of them will tell you they're good. Inning in the third, inning in 2/3. Why would I leave that guy out there and not use him? Because the bases are loaded in the 8th. well, bring him in. Let's go. He's your best pitcher. That's why he's the closer. He's your best reliever. So I think roles will be evolving in this day, Peter. It's such a different age than Denny McClain or Ron Guidry or Steve Carlton with pitch usage, and just the expectation of pitch usage has changed.
Yeah, I remember. I think Sparky Lyle had a 4-inning save once back in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't happen today.
And one of my pitching coaches in college was Mike Marshall. And I think in 1973, he won the Cy Young. He pitched 200 innings in relief. He had over 100 appearances.
Yeah, I remember that. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing, yeah.
Now, when you coached in the Dominican Republic, well, you want to talk about that experience in that interesting country?
It's a beautiful country. The people have just a feverish excitement about baseball, about playing baseball, about watching baseball, and it is truly takes you back like to when you were a kid, and just the excitement of these kids to show up at the ballpark. And like I said, the country's beautiful, and when you first go down there, it can give you a little bit of heartbreak to see some of the hardship that many of the people have down there. So many children without shoes, and it makes you want to help with some of these mission trips. And there's some good baseball groups that go down there that are great to support, that go down there and they take gloves and they take shoes. And my boo and I were trying to start something where we send the bats for boys, because that's one thing that isn't supplied down there. And we want to get groups to donate money or bats so we can give these children bats, instead of sticks. Because people are doing a phenomenal job of with humanitarian aid and gloves and shoes, but we got to get them some bats. But it's truly an experience that every baseball fan should go down there, whether you go to a complex and see a minor league game or you go to see a winter league game, which is something else, man, because the people are excited. And, you can smoke in the stadium. It turned back time a little bit, because you can smoke, you can have a drink, and there's all kind of dancing, and people just enjoy the atmosphere.
What was your team growing up as a boy that you supported?
Well, I grew up in Alabama, so I loved the Braves. And, Hank Aaron's from Mobile, and I lived in Mobile, and Willie McCovey's from Mobile. So I always thought I would be a hitter like one of those guys, but it didn't turn out that way.
Well,
but
you must have really enjoyed working with Dusty Baker then.
I did. I love working with Dusty. He's he's a unique person. He was so kind to me and my son when we were in Cincinnati. And, he was a good Brave, man. Back then the Braves were on TV. That was like the Turner Network carried all the Braves games, So those games were on all the time. Those with the Cubs. But the Cubs were during the day. I couldn't watch those. I had school. But I could watch the Braves games, man. They used to be bad, but I didn't care. I used to live and die with those Braves.
Yeah, one of the coolest things was when Henry Aaron, Davey Johnson, and Darrell Evans each had 40 home runs for the Braves one year.
That Darrell Evans, he was some kind of hitter, man. He was so underrated. He hit for the Braves. He hit when he was with the Tigers. And he was a modern hitter. He walked a lot, and he hit a lot of home runs. I used to love watching him hit.
And you did coach Aroldis Chapman.
I did, man. I met him once the Reds signed him. I flew out to Arizona, to Goodyear, Arizona, and the 3 coldest days, I think, in the history of Goodyear, Arizona, was Aroldis Chapman, myself, and Brian Price. And we got to the field, and this kid wants the long toss, and I'm like, oh, man, I'll long toss with him. This is 2011. And the next thing I know, I'm like, I need help. This guy wants a long toss to like 350 feet. I can't throw that far. But he was, and he was just a flick of the wrist for him to throw that distance. And some poor junior college catcher we paid $25 came to catch him that day, and because it was raining, we had to throw in the batting cage, and it was hard to see. I mean, the complex had just opened, so we had never thrown bullpens in the cage. You know, it was light. We had lights, but, man, the kid was taking a beating back there. You had this 20-year-old kid trying to catch Chapman throwing 102 miles an hour. But it was some kind of time, man. It rained. It was some kind of 3 days. Cold, wet, and trying to play catch and watch this guy was awesome. And to see him today, it's amazing. He's come so far, and he's so talented. The hardest thrower in the world. I coached the hardest thrower in the world. I'm happy to say that. I'm proud of that.
The time has flown by. Our guest has been Coach Mack Jenkins, who was for 6 years a coach for the Cincinnati Reds, and is headed back to the majors for sure. Any final and currently with the Team USA baseball. Any final words for our audience, Coach Mack Jenkins?
My final words would be, if you need anything about pitching, look me up on Twitter or Instagram. I can help you or your child become a better pitcher. Very good. It's been wonderful having you on the show, and we'll look to see you back in the major leagues. And what a wonderful show! So interesting talking with you, and I give you all the credit. What a tremendous career you've had, and I'm sure helped an awful lot of guys. And like you said, you got to care about people, because that's. I think that inspires people. I think it's why Terry Francona is so successful. He's like you said, he's a caring person. Terry Francona. Yeah, he is. I learned a lot just by watching him from across the field. And when I get back to the big leagues, I expect you to come to the game and see me. Yes, and I'll definitely will do that. And so thank you so much for being on the show tonight, Coach Mack Jenkins. Well, thanks for having me. I certainly enjoyed it. Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Coach Mack Jenkins. Good night. Good night.